Welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. My name is Yurii. I help people and brands shine through communities and personal connections. And my guest is David Nebinski, a community builder, founder, and event operator who has brought thousands of people together through over 100 events in New York, built communities from the ground up, hosted 400 plus podcast conversations, and spent years turning human connections into business momentum. So, welcome, David.
Wow. Great to be here, Yuri. Thank you so much. I think that is my bio, but it sounds nice when it's put together like that. Whew.
No pressure, no pressure. But
I
Zach
might have to
Houto,
say,
yeah,
okay, yeah, Zach, yeah, love
no
Zach.
pressure. That Zach Houto, Veronica Kaulinis, Rochelle Sonnenberg. There are at least three people who named your name of the previous guest. So no pressure at all, you know. And then we'll just definitely jump into conversation. And yeah, that's just you. So let's just have this first question. So tell me, what is one community activity that you enjoy the most and why?
I think if we're gonna, one of the most, since we're on a podcast and we're talking about community, I think one community activity that I like that I think is kind of fun for me and personal for me and hopefully for other people and something that's really kind of blossomed and flourished my personal network has been podcast mixers. So in July 15, 2022, a friend wrote a book and I invited him over to talk about the book. This was in 2022. I was trying to rebuild my personal network and meet new people, see my friends, etc. And had been podcasting for years as well. And I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a kind of a way to combine it a little bit. Invited him, invited a couple close friends, maybe some, I don't know if like Taylor Harrington has been on your podcast, but she attended. And I was like, okay, like let's see. Um, let's record this conversation and bring people together and then it was like 10 of us, 8 of us, 9 of us, and it was very casual. And then when it ended, both kind of sides were like, this was fun, you should keep doing this. And I was like, what is this? And it was an intentional gathering that, as you've seen, the power of podcasting and power of intentional conversations brings together a different kind of energy and feel and vibe and connection. And one thing led to another. I've hosted maybe 70 plus podcast events. And I think it was a win for me. Like I wanted to keep podcasting. I wanted to do it in person and I wanted to meet new people and see my friends. And yeah, I found like a really cool vehicle to do so. And done a little bit of less of it recently, but for a while I was sprinting on this format. And yeah, I think we were talking a little bit about it before, but I think podcasts have a unique way to bring people together and audiences together. And I'm sure, people that are listening to this have emailed you and messaged you over the years and stuff. And so yeah, podcast mixers, intentional gatherings that have a podcast in the middle as a way to spark conversation, has really grew and flourished my personal network and allowed me to connect with a lot of amazing people.
I totally feel what you're talking about because like podcast is my go-to place. When I invite people to a coffee chat, they can like, yeah, I don't have time, etc. And then like, can you go to a podcast? Yeah, sure. Here is my calendar.
Yeah.
Please pick a slot. And then we have a pretty similar conversation, but like on the recording. And then it's also like highlighting a person and then putting them out and hopefully connecting with many more people, because that's also what I noticed, that when first of all, we have this personal conversation. And secondly, people are listening to this, and when they are listening to a podcast, it feels like they are also in the room. It feels like they are specifically in this conversation, and it makes them feel better, better than just having a webinar. Because afterwards, what I also heard from guests, that people are connecting with them. So they
Wow.
listen to a podcast and like, oh, I listened to that episode. Let's connect. Let's talk more. And it's like a huge, huge vehicle. But I don't want like share. I'm curious about your experience. So first of all, we talked about podcasts to connect and personally to connect with your friends and to have this casual conversation, what happens next after you record your podcast? Like how it continues building the community?
So, um, well, they were like pop-up community experiences. So there was different themes, um, all different types of personal and professional themes. And so I think what the magic was, like, people would say, "Hey, I can't come to this one. When's the next one?" And then like I was always hosting the next one. So now I've been doing a little bit less, and people are asking about it. So, but for 2022 to 2025, I was hosting something maybe around every 2 to 3 weeks. And so if someone couldn't come, I would just say, "Hey, come to the next one." And so that allowed people to, you know, go to the next pop-up community experience. And then people that had come before, like, they would come to future ones, and they'd see, people that people that attended the prior ones with them, like, "Oh, I haven't seen you since last event, like, what's new," etc. So kind of created this like overall kind of community. And then, I mean, another thing that I would do after the event was over, like, people would be able to, there was like a group email, people would be able to connect with each other afterwards. And thankfully here in New York, a lot of people have got side projects and events and things like that that they were hosting. So kind of the group email chain after the event would allow people to share, whatever they have coming up. And that also would give like conversation hooks or ways for people to like further connect with each other. So yeah, like someone would share an event that they're going, and then someone else would go with that. And even if you didn't get to talk about that at the event, it allowed people to kind of find new hooks and for people to connect with each other. And yeah, so that's it was never like an official thing. It just was kind of like in a pop-up community experiences that were connected to the podcast and just kept going. And yeah, we'll see if there's something new will emerge from that. And that's what I found, is that it started with a small little thing and just kind of kept going. And then so many different formats, whether that was with a speaker or if it was all just peer to peer and short stories amongst the people that are attending, or a couple people were sharing. I found that through this particular thing, so many different new experiments and new formats would emerge. So if you're listening to this and you think that you're kind of feeling not stuck, but just whatever the community that you're building, it feels like you could potentially do something more or different. I found that like it does like it would just emerge once I was like, I'd have different constraints. I'd be like, wow, okay, this is a lot of events, and I want to keep doing them, but like maybe it doesn't have to be 20 people. And then to be like, oh, like what if it was like 6 people or 8 people? Then I would try that, and then people would say, oh, actually, and at that point I was like, oh, I don't know if I can get 20 people to come to this event. And then I'd be like, okay, let me try a smaller format. And then the smaller format, people are actually, I really like the smaller format. And I'm like, okay, great, it's easier for me. And then so yeah, it's interesting, these things that like you think that you've kind of like not plateaued, but just like you think that you've seen it all, but then the constraints of having a publishing schedule or wanting to bring people together or creating a particle like allowed for all this new stuff to emerge. And so like there's no way like from that first one in July 15, 2022 to anticipate the 70 plus podcast mixers, like no way that I would think that I'd do that. But it was just like one event after another, one podcast after another. It just keeps going. And yeah, and people saying, hey, like I want to come. Like I remember, and I'm sure this happens with you. It's like I remember in the beginning, it was some people came up to me like at events that I didn't know, and they'd say, "Hey, I saw that thing that you're doing. That's really cool. Can I come?" And be like, "Oh, okay." Like there's more people that are following this along than I thought, And I'm sure there's people that have been listening to this podcast that haven't reached out to you. I recommend you reach out to Yurii, say hello, ask him what he's working on and what's going on, and how to further connect with you. And yeah, so I just think I think there's a lot of power and benefit and for both sides when people actually reach out and communicate and say, hey, that's cool, what's next?
I can clearly see the personal side, how it benefits personal people. Because once again, it's all about human connections. It's all about meeting each other. And like you connect with one person, you connect with a second, and then it's exponential because it's like grow and grow and grow. And what is the business side? What is the business effect of these events?
Okay, so in September of 2025, I had recently left my job, and I it was connected to my birthday, and I was like, okay, like I'm going to host a podcast event connected to my birthday. Podcasting has been so meaningful for me. Events have been so meaningful for me, and let's do that and kind of bring together people. And I had been going through a transition at the moment, and so friends thankfully were asking me what's going on, and I felt like a great way to just like share and talk about this was through a podcast event. And so that was, yeah, September. And then at that event, I said, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm thinking through. Here's the potential opportunities that I have. Here's some things that I'm thinking about. I was really unsure. And Zach, who you mentioned, said, hey, like, let's collab on something, or like, I'd love to support. And like, I've got some ideas, and I won't share too many of the details, but then we got together for coffee, like a couple days later, and he said, "Hey, I'm thinking about this conference," and and he had come to my other events too, that some of which had podcasts at, and then one thing led to another. Like we kind of started thinking about the idea of a conference for community builders. And at that time, this was the fall of 2025, and we were thinking it'd be early 2026. So we kind of like kept in touch about it, but we kind of it wasn't as urgent as some other priorities. And then again, December 2025, hosted another podcast event. Zach attended, and then he said like, "Hey, what's new? What's going on? Like, how are things going?" And I said, "Actually, like, as of the last like 7 to 10 days, like a major project that I had been working on just finished." And he's like, "Cool. I actually like just learned about this incredible new venue called the Mallin. They're opening up this brand new event space, and like I think we can maybe cut a deal and like make something work out there, like as part of their opening. Like, let's chat about this, but I feel like there's an opportunity here." So then that we hopped on a call or got together a couple days later, and then from there we like sprinted towards the community led growth conference on Friday, March 13th. So the business there was like I worked with Zach on creating that, and for him it was a business initiative. Like he had been hosting events and sponsored other events, but he wanted to bring his customers and his ecosystem, his overall community together and with me. And so it was a business benefit for me. It was, and for him too. And I don't know the exact details of, how it ended up, how he was calculating ROI, but that podcast event he had attended prior ones. Then in September, like I told him exactly like where I was at. He said, "Here's an idea." And then, a couple months later, brought it up again, and then we started making progress together, moving forward. And so, like again, the power of bringing people together on a repeated basis, in an intentional way, can lead to incredible serendipity. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm like, wait, I need to do this again. What about?
Yeah. That's how it works. That's also the serendipity. Yeah, we're having this conversation, and like your thoughts are coming back, and you are thinking about like all the ways of how to do this back. And you talked about two very important things. So first of all, intentional, and secondly, is like repeated.
Yeah.
Because I have. Before this podcast, I had another one called Community Life, where I was talking to community experts about their life journeys. And I specifically told them that we will use the word community as minimum as possible. We were talking about their life journeys, about like their childhood, about their parents, about their friends, hobbies, etc. Everything. Like that was like one of the most funniest conversations I've ever had. And we didn't talk anything around business, like 0.0 business stuff. But then, once again, as you said, it was continuous. Like I had over 100 episodes, 120 something, etc. And then it was about connecting on the human level. And afterwards, I joined like this community ROI, started talking about business stuff. But people are coming back, because when they feel that you are doing this human connection, when they feel your passion inside, when they feel that you are doing this not just for money, for business, but just to specifically learn about them and to highlight them and to open them up to the world. There are so many things. And also podcast is like the content machine. So you have like just one conversation, then you can do whatever you want with it. You can have videos, blog posts, quotes, clips, etc. And then like it's the best part when I have just one podcast conversation. Afterwards, I keep highlighting the person, I don't know, for months, for years. Sometimes we had a conversation like 2 years ago, but I still have those clips and they're evergreen. And I just repost them and like, hey, go check that conversation back then. So it's like, you have this conversation once and then it continues. So from your experience, from your podcasting experience, it's a question that I get asked a lot. How do you start a podcast around community?
I don't know if I know how to start a podcast. I don't know how to specifically start one around community. I mean, I've got ideas, but I don't have as much experience in that as you do of starting community-oriented podcasts. But I started the Portfolio Career podcast on my couch with one of my roommates at the time in 2018. I was learning how to podcast in a podcasting course that was co-created by Seth Godin and Alexander DePalma, legends, obviously. And that was 300 people around the world I was in this course and called the Podcasting Fellowship, which then changed its name to Podcasting Workshop. But anyways, and the power of like-minded people, 300 people around the world that were all trying to start and create a podcast at the same time was magical. And I was interested in starting a podcast. I wanted to start a podcast, but being in this course and being around all these other people that wanted to do it too, like I had to do it. Like there was just like, it was just the inevitable outcome. So then I started it on the couch with my roommate in a minimum viable way. Like I had this, I actually have it right next to me. I'm using the same equipment that I bought then, by the way. I mean, there's this little H1 handy recorder, also by a company named Zoom, which is interesting. But I used this, put it on the table, and we chatted. Used this for the first 40 episodes, something like that. I bought more fancy equipment around then, but I didn't use it because I didn't feel as comfortable. And I published those episodes, and they're listenable. And then I built some more confidence and momentum, and then upgraded my tech stack to the things that I bought before. And so that's how I got started. The being around other like-minded people was just incredible, and then starting with someone that my roommate at the time, who was just like, yeah, I'm down to experiment. He had audio experience too, and so he was like, hey, I'm happy to kind of, if there's tech things that you don't feel comfortable with, but yeah, incredible way. So that's how I got started.
It's not about tech, I believe. It's all about the passion and the ideas that you want to include. I remember some long time ago, I don't know, it was like 2, 3 years ago. I had a shitty camera. I didn't have a microphone, and it was like just a Zoom conversation, like very easy. And there was a person who asked me like, how do you start a podcast, etc.
Yeah.
I bought this mic, I have this equipment, I have this video camera, etc. Like, did you record any episodes? No, I didn't do anything. So I'm asking like how to do this. So basically, you don't really need to have all this equipment to start. And as you said, you have just one mic, you have a passion, and you just talk. And I also, to your point, they're listenable. It's something that I also see a lot currently in the podcast. And of course, if we are talking about like a Diary of a CEO or Joe Rogan podcast, etc., it's like the whole movie setup, and they are like shooting like shows, videos, of course. But overall, I hear a lot of conversations. They're just going through the Zoom, and it's not about like the super duper quality of what. Okay, yes, you have to have a good mic at least
Yeah.
because it helps.
Yeah.
But it's not about like the having the fanciest camera and having the fanciest studio or whatever. It's all about the content that you are putting around. It's all about how do you structure the conversation? How are you passionate about the conversation? Like, are you really interested in the person you are talking to? Are you interested in the topic you are discussing? So I have this question for you. How do you choose the topics?
So, not to deflect, I'll get back to that in a second. But I do have a free podcasting course, so people can check that out if they're trying to get started with their own podcast. I think it's at portfoliocareerpodcast.com/course. I can share the link with you afterwards. But yeah, that was I wanted to just make it very simple. Podcasting had changed my life, and I felt like if I could create something that would allow and help people get their shows going, and that was like work worth doing. So yeah, happy to share that, and hopefully that helps people. So then your question was, how do I decide what to talk about?
Yeah.
So I look for like a conversation catalyst. So I look for things that are, an author writes a book. That's a catalyst. They now have this artifact, this thing in the world that they're like, this is what I stand for. I've spent a year or more putting all my best ideas together into this one thing with a wrapper around it, and like, here it is. And they want to get the word out about that. So it's a win-win thing of like, it's top of mind for them. They want more people to know about it. And they want people to like, this is their life's work, or there's something that's very important to them. They think it really matters. They feel like it can help people. They want more people to know about that. So, I would look for authors that, writing new books. And so that was a conversation catalyst. And similarly, yeah, would look for other types of things like that, whether that's a new project, or so for the Portfolio Career podcast, yeah, was looking for catalyst, and maybe it was like a viral LinkedIn post or a viral Twitter thread. Someone who had just a new perspective, something that like I didn't, they created like a Notion template or something like that that I just hadn't seen before. And then now these days, as a solopreneur, now I'm looking for a lot more practical stuff for me. Like I'm talking to, people in more details about their portfolio careers, their solopreneur journeys, like, yeah, a lot more practical, which is nice. So yeah, looking for people that I can truly like learn from and apply. Like last week I was talking to the guest before we started recording. And he's like, so what do people want to hear, or like what? And I was like, here's what I want to know. I was like, yeah, the audience is me. Not to sound cocky, but it was like, what do I want to learn? And I feel like I've been trying to do that more and more, and I feel like that's also been a learning for just my confidence as a podcaster. I feel like for a while I also would like try to like dance around some questions and be like, oh, to the person that's out there. And it's like, I think I got some advice or some nudges from people along the way that was just like, hey, we're listening to the show because when they want to learn, we want to also like, we know you and we want to learn your perspective and not this hypothetical person. Like we've been listening, we got to know you. Like we kind of know where you're at. Like ask the question that you really want to know. Like, because like if you're very like intent and very serious about it, and allows you to go to a certain level of depth because like you have a unique perspective on this topic as well. Like we'll be able to learn through that. So I've been trying to ask a lot more like specific questions that I can apply. Um, and yeah, like I've definitely gone as we were talking about these podcast events, like so many different types and episodes about community building, writing, big life questions, relationships, etc. And like I've definitely like veered along the way, and there's some guardrails, but yeah, it's been fun to have like a flexible medium to just kind of follow the curiosity. And I feel like more and more these days it's like if I'm putting a lot of time into it just like you are, and so it's like how do I how do I make it worth my time? I don't know. Do you think about this a lot of like how do you make, speaking of community ROI, how do you think about like the ROI of podcasting for you?
The more you talk about with people, the more you broaden your horizons. And
Hmm.
sometimes I have a list of questions that I send to people, but sometimes I have those conversations, and I believe this is one of them where I don't really care about those questions because I just go with the flow. I just listen fully to what you are sharing, and I want to learn your experience. And I really love that about how you phrase it, what I want to learn personally, because that's my motto. When I go out there, I tell people, hey, I'm here to learn from you firsthand. Yes, it might sound egoistical, but I will ask you all the questions that I want to know. And yes, please answer if you can. If you cannot, just tell me. I will cut it from the final episode. It's totally good.
Yeah.
But if you can, please share them. And I feel like it's also very important parts that you've shared about this connection catalyst, but you need to prepare. You need to
Mm.
prepare for the conversation. You need to, first of all, find those catalysts. But at least you need to, I don't know, maybe read a summary of a book, or maybe read a book, or maybe go through some posts of person. I'm curious,
Yeah.
how do you prepare for a conversation?
Yeah, this is a big topic. So I I used to and still do, even though I'm doing less of it. Um, Loved the preparation for an episode. Back in the day, I'd say like the podcast was the most meaningful thing for me. And I would spend, hours diving deep, especially for these titans of the industry that have big bodies of work. And I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to learn, Derek Sivers, an example, like why is he so popular? Like he's written all these books and has all this content out there and has had so many unique life chapters. Like how did this all come to be? Like what are the main like what do people deeply respect him for? Like I need to know that. Like I need to get into the details so that I can have the context, the mental model, and the world like understanding like what his worldview is a little bit, so that I could prepare to have a conversation with him and not look like an idiot. And so I really loved that, and I would really like dive into that. So yeah, read the books, listen to prior podcast episodes. I think that that's really helpful. I also like taking the podcast episodes and putting them into like a transcription tool like Otter. There's something really cool about the like looking at the text and listening at the same time. I think it like helps different parts of the brain process the information. So yeah, I would really dive deep into that. Increasingly, that's not as much of a focus as I've been, having to spend more time on figuring out how to pay the bills. So podcasting has, uh, you know, truly changed my relationships, my network, people that I've learned from, etc. Um, you know, on a direct basis, it hasn't really, like I don't have sponsors to the show. But through it, it's led to jobs, etc., through the people that I've met over time. So yeah, that's the preparation was like really fun. Like I really liked trying to find something that was really personal to me, that was maybe unique and different for them. Yeah, I think as you're talking about this like aha moment, like the podcast, like it can actually be really helpful for the other person too. Like just as we were talking about, I'm like, oh, maybe I should be hosting these events again or do them more. And like, there's something about when someone does a lot of great research it's good for them and it's good for the other person too. So more and more, I've also just been trying to have conversations with my friends, and I already kind of know a lot of stuff about them, and so it's just more of like, let's just taking our conversation to the next level. For some of these event ones, there's not a lot of prep, but there is prep to get people to invite people to attend. Um, I have another podcast as well called A Chief of Staff. So I've got two podcasts right now. Zach and I also kind of have a podcast connected to the CLG conference. So lots of podcasts these days. I love the medium. Um, that show, A Chief of Staff, is really fun because I feel that chiefs of staff in general, they focus a lot more on highlighting the CEO or the principal, another executive leader, etc. And they're less, for the most part, they're behind the scenes a lot more, and they have less, public information about their worldviews, their ideas, etc. So that's really fun. Where it's hard to prepare. Like kind of similar to the way that you did with how we started here. And a lot of those people I actually know. So like I kind of know like a spiky point of view or a thing that they're passionate about. These days, obviously AI is really prevalent in the corporate world. So like, how is this chief of staff using AI is like probably a question I could ask all of them. But that's really fun because there isn't a lot of public information out there, and it's kind of like this exploration. And I really like that because a lot of those people haven't been on podcasts before, so it's like fun to kind of like co-create this new experience, and that hopefully is transformational, just like podcasting has been for me, or helps them get get their name and their word and their ideas out there in a way that like you just never know. You talked a little bit about how people start to reach out when they hear someone's voice or they see them on a podcast. I hope that that happens to the guests on both shows. Yeah, I just love the way that you're thinking about this, and how I've seen it too is just like this one conversation leads to a lot of other conversations. And I think that that's just really magical. And it doesn't have to be a lot of other conversations. If it's just one other one that is the conversation for two other people, like that'd be huge.
Sometimes podcasts sound scary, especially if someone didn't do any episodes before. And I had a bunch of people who told me, "Oh, it was my first podcast in life,"
Oh,
etc.
nice.
And I was so afraid of it. And then we had such a great conversation. I was like, "Why have you like? Are you afraid of having a coffee
Mm,
chat?" Like it's pretty much the same. Yes, we recorded, but it doesn't mean that you have to prepare or like have written script that you have to read from your computer to answer all the questions. You have all the answers in your brain. Like you don't really have to. Yeah, of course, if you are a politician, yeah, it's better to prepare. Most likely you don't have to speak from your heart. But once again, it's also the question. And that's the beauty of the podcast, because when you are like, I feel like the main very important thing, be in the conversation. Because if you have a list of questions and you are thinking, waiting for a pause for a person to stop to ask the second question, even if it's not connected, it's crazy. But if you are
yeah.
being in a conversation, like you will just see questions, when the person is answering, when the person is sharing your experience, sharing your soul, you will have another question and another question and another question. And sometimes you will even forget to ask some of other questions because of like, that's how humans are. We are, when we are having a conversation with someone else, we are not coming to each other with a list of questions and list of answers. We are just talking and seeing what's
Yeah.
happening, and then we are just going with the flow, and that's the beauty of it. And I totally get, your moment that you've said, like what's your take on AI? It's like the grand opening question. Everyone can talk about this, and you have to start somewhere. And once again, the more you are having these conversations, the better you understand what to talk next, because usually it won't be like that every person is different. Yes, they have their unique experiences, but most likely they have like 80% of challenges are very similar. They might cope with them in a different way. Still, they are very, very similar. And I'm curious, like podcast is like the one part. So you have a conversation, you record it. What happens next? Like how do you reuse the content that you've created?
Mm, not very well, but here's some things that I've done. Well, like, yeah, we can talk about how I'm doing it now. So right now I'm trying to integrate things more and more. I feel like for a while I maybe over the last year and a half, it felt like things were kind of a little bit spread out over the place, especially as I left my job and had been trying to figure out what's next. I wanted to kind of like have more integration between these different media properties. Um, so what happens is, which happened earlier today, a podcast episode goes out. Um, so it's been 7+ years. I think this is episode 425, something like that. That episode went out. I'm going to include that into the newsletter. So David Nebinski's Substack that goes out every 2 weeks, if not more. Usually it's every week now. And in that, like, I'm going to include that podcast episode. Maybe it's like the main thing, or maybe I write a personal story or something I've really been learning and then kind of like include it in there. Sometimes like the show, that episode is like a really big show to me, and like and so like I will kind of like make it more prominent for a wide variety of potential different reasons. Then yeah, create a clip or something like that and post that either on Substack and or Instagram. And then the next week, post about that likely on LinkedIn. With two different podcasts, though, it is, yeah, there is a little bit of like, where, what am I pointing people to? But I think these days, just in general, like, I'm trying to think about creating properties or assets that are like unique and standalone on their own. So like this one clip, like great clip, talks about how to start a podcast, and here's 3 reasons to do it, and 4 steps to do it. Boom, done. And it's like, okay, if you wanted to learn more about that, you can listen to the podcast episode I did with Yurii. Similarly, like, so it's less about like, here's the link out to, go over here to go check that out. It's like, no, this individual post should be standalone. And if this hooks you and you want to learn more, like, totally cool. But like, I'm doing less like lead kind of content. So anyways, it is trying to create like a flywheel of all of this type of stuff, or like a motion. I'm not doing a good job of it, but I'm trying. And then thankfully, like, there is a little bit of like difference in timing. So Portfolio Career Podcast goes out on Thursday. Age HIFA staff goes out on Tuesday. On Tuesday, the podcast goes out at the same time as the Age HIFA staff Substack newsletter. So that's connected to Substack. So that's nice. It's like one push and out. And um yeah, then LinkedIn will kind of see like whatever's like top of mind of like what I'm trying to like post there for a wide variety of different reasons. But it's hard with all these different properties. But it also is nice because then it's like there's things to get the word out about versus like, how do I figure out what to post today? Which I know some people are like, I want to post more on LinkedIn, and like they don't know. I'm like, I've got too much stuff. I don't know. How do you think about this stuff? I'm sure you talked about how like you bring back clips for months and stuff like that. How do you figure out what to post?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah? I really love your approach of standalone posts, and I feel like I
Mm.
follow the same one because out of every podcast conversation, it's usually a Substack newsletter. It's usually like an episode itself. Then there are like small clips with nuggets of wisdom here and there. Then I use some quotes that people like from the conversation and put them like on a picture with some, this person's photo, and like
Yeah.
to make it nice and look good. And then I just share it, as you said, as standalone posts. Because if I had a conversation with someone 2 years ago, but they shared tactics that are evergreen, why should I forget about this episode? I will
Yeah.
not. I still have all these conversations. I still have all the things, and I'm trying. Like I have a posting system that I like very easy host on Google Sheets, like just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc.
Yeah.
And I try to not just post new episodes, but like ensure that every week I use at least one older episodes or at
Oh,
least two
nice. Yeah.
older episodes. So it's like it's continuous, you know. We have this conversation now and it will be the 52nd episode. But like when I'll be recording 100th episode, at some point I will reuse clips from the 52nd episode because it will go over and over again. Because once again, what we share, we are not talking about like news and politics in 2026 or like what how's AI growing on this time because like in a month it will be like shitty information, nobody cares about it. But we're more talking about like something that is fundamental. Yes, it might change, but like not very much. And it's always like that. And afterwards, as you've said, you just create the standalone part. And I noticed that people are actually very busy. They don't always have time to listen to a podcast. They don't
Yeah.
even have time to read a newsletter. That's why exactly on a newsletter, like on top, I do like TLDR, like 5 things you need to know about this podcast. And then they choose whether they go deeper, whether they go listen, whether they go read the whole blog post. Because like, you know, you have to grab attention. And it's something that I learned from journalism, upside down pyramid. When
Mm.
you are writing an article, you have to put the most important information on top. So if someone is not reading an article, they're just getting this information and then they go. So they still have something in their mind. And I'm always trying to use the same thing, like upside down pyramid. So to put something very important on top and then to go deeper. And I can tell you, I connect a lot with community builders. And not that many community builders are really learning. So they're just doing their job, but not that many people are reading books or listening to podcasts
Mm.
or reading newsletters, which is kind of like a little bit crazy, but it is what it is. So
It's hard work.
yeah, it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's also you don't really have a lot of free time. You
Yeah.
don't have a time to sit and read or to listen. You have to squeeze the small moments. That's why once again I love your approach of standalone, small products, small posts or small clips, because that's what people really need nowadays. And then maybe, hopefully, they will go deeper. But you never know. You never know. And I'm curious, like you've done over, as you said, 425th episode is
Yeah.
going out. Do you have a plan of like how many episodes will you create, or you are just keep creating, or like what is your approach?
I wish there was a plan. It's like I'm having fun. It's helpful to my life. I feel like I'm getting ROI from it. I'm evolving it in a way that like feels good to me. And thankfully I'm in New York and there's a lot of amazing people here. There's a lot of amazing community builders. There's a lot of amazing yeah, people with like portfolio careers here. And there's also a lot of amazing people that like could come to an event and we could co-create an episode as we were talking about for these podcast mixers. I have like a couple ideas on like who the next couple of guests could be, but you know, I've got like an Apple Notes thing that I add when I see something. But in general, it's just kind of like it's just something that I do. You know, like I just um it's just I know that it's led to great things over time. I feel like it's going to continue. I don't know what those are going to be. I don't know if it's, you know, someone now listens to this episode and says, "Hey, like, you know, I heard you talk about 7 years of podcasting and 70 events and 2 podcasts and, you know, sounds like you're friends with Yurii. I think he's so cool. Like, we should talk. I want to do X with you." Like, who knows? Like, that could be, you know, and if you're listening and you've got something like that that could change my life, like I would love to hear it. If you can change Yuri's life too, like that'd be cool too. Um, so yeah, you kind of never know. Like I had a friend the other day that said something like, I interpreted it as like, I do a lot of, for a while I was hosting these different events and, you know, different mini conferences and they were kind of like serious personal projects. And then
Mm,
like now they've been basically like foundational for like the conference that Zach and I did. Like he had gone to a lot of my different events And then when we talked about like co-creating and designing it, he was like, I really liked when you did this. I really liked when you did that. Now that you have a little bit more time and we've got some more resources, like what's the equivalent of taking that part to the next level? What's the equivalent of taking this part to the next level? Or like, and so all this stuff, and you never know what it is, but like you're planting seeds for future conversations or future building blocks. And like I continue to see that with both of these podcasts. I don't know where they're going to take me, but like it's been going up and to the right. There's some ups and there's some downs, but directionally up and to the right. And I'm sure that's been happening for you. And I'm excited to see what happens for you in, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, maybe even 1 month.
You
That,
never know. It's
yeah,
it, it's a
exactly.
beauty. It's the beauty of podcasting. And once again, it's the beauty of human connections because
Yeah.
podcast, for me personally, is just another way to connect with a person,
Yeah,
to build
exactly.
this conversation. So it's not like, I'm interviewing someone and I have this like 20 questions I must ask in like 30 minutes. No, it won't work. But it's more like to being just only here and like having this conversation.
Yeah.
That's the one thing
Yeah.
that matters. Everything else, we'll never know what will happen. We are just here and now, and we are doing what we can at
Exactly.
the moment we are. And I really wish to have the sky is the limit, but time is the limit to our conversation. And I will ask you these questions that I also hear a lot. So there are so many amazing humans who are coming and like, hey, I was thinking about starting a podcast for like 2 years. So I didn't do anything. I have this great idea. So, what is like one easy step to take right away for someone who wants to start their podcast?
Hop on Zoom and press record.
That's the best thing. Yeah. It's very easy, it's very actionable, and it's something that people are struggling with a lot. I can tell. And I would when you show me your first mic that you were recording the podcast, it was amazing. You just put the mic, you just sit on a couch and you just talk. That's it. No fancy setup, no prepared like list of questions, nothing like that. Just have this conversation. And it's
And yeah,
amazing.
and what I found is that when you when you have that event on the calendar, or you book the guests or your friend, etc., it magically forces you to get better, to get more prepared. And I feel like that is actually one of the biggest hacks of podcasting and of hosting events. You know, for hosting an event, like my apartment somehow gets cleaner because I know people are coming over. Isn't that an amazing win? Like just the fact that like my apartment now gets cleaner. Similarly, like you have a podcast with amazing guests like Mari Andrews, Seth Godin, etc. Like I now dive deep into their work that is revered by millions of people, and how special is that? It was a forcing function for me to stop doom scrolling, but to read and listen and get educated and inspired by their work. Like so, it is a podcast, but it's a hack for learning and for growth. And if it's hosting podcast events, that's a hack to connect with your friends, to bring people together, and then yeah. So. Uh, that's I'm excited to see who decides to host the next event to start a podcast from this because the action is great, but also what happens in your brain because of you when you commit to something is also super powerful.
At least three people mentioned you. At least three people, guests, told me that I have to talk to you. So to keep this conversation going, name two people I should talk to about community ROI.
Is there a certain topic or area, expertise, jurisdiction that comes to mind?
Someone you just love talking about and talking to yourself. Someone that recently popped up on your radar, someone who's on top of your mind. So no specific industry, no specific, someone who you think is an amazing human in the community world.
Okay. Hmm. So hard to pick. There's so
There are so many. I totally get it. But no worries. Like if you have someone, just put the name. If not, I will definitely ask you afterwards.
I saw a text message from Brian Helfman and Rachel Saslow earlier today. They're two amazing people that more people should know about their incredible work. So, um, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. David, thank you so, so much for this very unscripted and I would say very personal conversation because you shared not just what works for you and how it works for you, but you also shared a personal story. And me personally, I very much cherish this kind of conversations because like it's not about metrics, it's not about you should track this, you should put it there, you should go this, but it's all about how do you put your passion, intention, and your interest into the thing that you are doing and how it opens the doors and how it changes your life. So thank you so, so much for sharing your personal life journey. And yeah, it was very, very nice talking to you.
Likewise, one might be able to call this a community life journey.
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, like I'm thinking about reviving that podcast
Mm,
one day. So maybe we'll have this community life conversation
cool.
also. So get
Cool.
ready for that. And yeah, see you in the community world.
Thanks, Yurii. You too.
And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.